The spaceport called Orion Gate was never quiet. Huge cargo ships moved slowly outside the giant glass walls. Robots carried heavy boxes across metal floors. Alien traders shouted in different languages. Security drones floated above the crowds, watching everyone carefully. Every hour, thousands of travelers entered the station. Some came to trade, some came to hide, some came to escape war. But during the last 6 months, one strange rumor had spread across the galaxy. People whispered about a small alien girl, a little child with silver eyes and pale white skin. She always traveled alone, no family, no guards, no ship, and everywhere she appeared, something terrible happened afterward. At the spaceport on Titan V, an explosion destroyed 3 docking bays only hours after she disappeared. At another station near the Vega colonies, armed soldiers suddenly killed each other after trying to capture her. One entire mining station even vanished from all communication systems after she visited. Nobody understood how, but everyone remembered one thing. The girl always asked the same question: "Are you my father?" That question became famous across the galaxy. Pilots joked about it nervously. Smugglers feared hearing it. Even trained soldiers avoided talking about her. Some people believed she was cursed. Others believed she was bait created by pirates. Some claimed she was not even a child at all. But nobody truly knew the truth. Far away from all those rumors, a tired human pilot walked through docking sector 9. His name was Ethan Cole. His old cargo jacket was covered with dust from long-distance travel. Dark circles sat under his eyes. He looked like a man who had not slept properly in weeks. His ship had barely survived its last delivery mission. Half the engines were damaged. The food machine on board stopped working 2 days ago. And all Ethan wanted now was a hot meal and a quiet bed. He stepped through the crowded market area slowly, ignoring the loud voices around him. An alien merchant tried selling him fake energy crystals. A service robot almost crashed into him. 2 drunk miners argued beside a food stand. Normal spaceport. Chaos. Ethan sighed tiredly and moved toward a small noodle shop near the lower levels of the station. Then suddenly the noise around him changed. The crowd became quieter. People started moving away from one direction. Some travelers lowered their heads and quickly walked off. Others looked nervous. A woman grabbed her child and rushed into another hallway. Ethan frowned. Something felt wrong. Then he saw her. A small alien girl walked slowly through the center of the crowd. She looked no older than 8 years old. Her long white hair rested over a dark gray coat far too large for her small body. Her silver eyes moved carefully across every face she passed. The station suddenly felt colder. Nobody spoke near her. The little girl stopped in front of a large reptilian alien carrying cargo boxes. She looked up quietly and asked, "Are you my father?" The alien's face instantly changed with fear. Without answering, he dropped his boxes and hurried away into the crowd. The girl continued walking calmly. Again and again she stopped before strangers. "Are you my father?" Each time, the reaction was the same. Fear, panic, silence. Ethan watched carefully, confused by the strange scene. Then one old station worker whispered nervously beside him. "That's her." Ethan looked at him. "The cursed child," the worker said softly. "You should leave before." Ethan could ask another question. The little girl suddenly stopped moving. Her silver eyes slowly turned toward him. For one long second, the entire hallway became silent. Then she walked directly toward Ethan, step by step. The closer she came, the more nervous the people around them became. Some quietly backed away. Others pulled out communication devices too. "Call security." Ethan remained standing still. The little girl finally stopped right in front of him. She stared deeply into his face, almost like she recognized him. Then softly, quietly, she asked, "Are you my father?" Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but before he could speak, every alarm across Orion Gate suddenly exploded to life. Warning: unknown warships exiting hyperspace. Red emergency lights flashed across the station. People screamed and started running in panic. Outside the giant glass walls, massive black warships appeared from the darkness of space, at least 20 of them, their weapons slowly powered on, aimed directly at the station. Then a cold voice echoed through every speaker in Orion Gate. "Return the girl immediately, or this station will be destroyed." Panic spread across Orion Gate within seconds. Red warning lights flashed across every hallway. Emergency sirens screamed through the station. Travelers pushed each other while running toward escape pods outside the giant windows. The black warships stayed completely still, like silent predators, waiting for permission to kill. Ethan looked from the ships back to the small alien girl standing in front of him. She did not look scared, but her silver eyes moved nervously through the crowd, almost like she was searching for danger nobody else could see around them. Security drones rushed into the market sector. Armed station soldiers followed close behind. "There she is," one officer shouted. The crowd instantly backed away from the girl, leaving her and Ethan alone in the center of the hallway. Ethan raised his hands slowly. "Hey, relax," he said. "She's just a child." The officers ignored him completely. A tall security commander stepped forward carefully. Fear was visible on his face, even though he carried a plasma rifle. "Move away from the girl," he ordered Ethan. Ethan frowned. "What did she even do?" Before the commander could answer, the station speakers crackled again. "You have 3 minutes." The cold voice announced, "Return the child." The black warships outside slowly charged their weapons brighter. People screamed louder. Then suddenly 2 soldiers grabbed the little girl by her arms. At first she stayed silent, then her face changed completely. Pure fear filled her silver eyes. "Don't touch me," she screamed. The lights above the hallway exploded instantly. Glass shattered across the floor. Several security drones suddenly lost power and crashed from the air. Every nearby computer screen turned black. The entire station shook violently. The soldiers holding the girl were thrown backward like invisible hands smashed into them. People around Ethan began screaming in terror. "She's doing it again," someone yelled. The little girl dropped to her knees, holding her head tightly. No, please stop," she whispered shakily. Ethan stared in shock. He had seen strange things before during his years traveling space, but never anything like this. The commander quickly aimed his weapon at the child. "Fire if she moves," he shouted to his men. The little girl looked up slowly. Tears rolled down her face, and for a second, the air itself felt heavy. Ethan suddenly noticed something strange. The floor around her was freezing. Thin ice slowly spread across the metal beneath her feet. Then all the station windows trembled at once. Outside, one of the giant black warships suddenly powered its weapons fully. "They're about to attack," a soldier yelled. The commander looked terrified now. "Take the girl now," he ordered. The soldiers moved toward her again, but before they could touch her, the little girl rushed toward Ethan suddenly and grabbed his jacket tightly. The moment she touched him, everything stopped. The shaking ended. The freezing air disappeared. The lights stopped flickering. Even the girl's breathing slowly calmed down. Everyone in the hallway noticed it immediately. The commander lowered his weapon slightly, confused. Ethan looked down at the child holding onto him. She refused to let go. Then she whispered softly, "They always hurt me." For the first time, Ethan did not see a monster. He only saw a frightened little girl. Suddenly, a station officer ran into the hallway carrying a data tablet. "Commander," he shouted urgently. "We identified her." The hallway became silent again. The officers swallowed nervously before continuing. "She's Lyran." Several soldiers instantly stepped backward in fear. Ethan frowned. "What's a Lyran?" he asked. Commander looked pale. "An extinct species," he answered quietly. "At least, they were supposed to be extinct." The officer activated the tablet screen. An old image appeared showing tall, pale aliens with glowing silver eyes. "During the Galactic War," the officer explained, "the Lyrans created biological weapons using emotional energy." Ethan looked confused. The officer pointed toward the little girl. Their children were the most dangerous, he whispered. When frightened or angry, they could destroy entire cities without meaning to. Ethan slowly looked down at her again. The little girl avoided his eyes, almost like she already knew everyone feared her. Then suddenly gunfire exploded somewhere nearby. The entire hallway shook again. A wounded guard ran around the corner screaming, "Mercenaries! Breach the lower sector. They're here for the child." Seconds later, masked soldiers wearing black armor stormed into the market area, firing plasma weapons everywhere. People scattered in panic. Security officers dropped instantly under heavy fire. One mercenary pointed directly at the little girl. "Take her alive," he shouted. Ethan cursed under his breath. Without thinking, he grabbed the child's hand and pulled her behind cover. Plasma shots exploded against the walls around them. "Come on," Ethan said quickly. "We need to move." The little girl stared at him with wide silver eyes, almost shocked that someone was helping her instead of running away. Together they escaped into a dark maintenance hallway beneath the station. Far above them, alarms and explosions echoed through Orion Gate. As they ran through the shadows, the little girl suddenly looked up at Ethan again. Then she quietly whispered something that made his blood run cold. "You came back this time." The lower maintenance tunnels of Orion Gate were dark, cold, and almost empty. Old pipes covered the walls. Steam hissed from broken vents. Red emergency lights flashed above Ethan and the little girl as they ran deeper beneath the station. Far behind them, gunfire and explosions still echoed through the metal corridors. The mercenaries were searching everywhere. Ethan moved quickly while holding the girl's hand tightly. He did not fully understand what was happening. But one thing was clear now: if those people captured her, she would never survive. The little girl stayed unusually quiet beside him. Her silver eyes carefully watched every shadow around them. Finally, Ethan stopped near an old service door. Breathing heavily, "This way," he whispered. He used a stolen security card from one of the unconscious guards upstairs. After a few seconds, the rusty door opened slowly. Behind it waited a small hidden cargo lift leading toward the station hangars. Ethan quickly pressed the controls. Doors closed. The lift began moving downward. For the first time since the chaos started, silence filled the small metal room. Ethan leaned against the wall tiredly, then slowly looked toward the child beside him. "All right," he said carefully. "Who are you really?" The little girl lowered her eyes toward the floor. "My name is Lyra," she answered softly. Ethan nodded slowly. "And why are warships trying to destroy an entire station just to get you?" Lyra stayed silent for several seconds. Then she quietly said, "I don't know." Ethan sighed. That answer did not help at all. Before he could ask another question, the station speakers suddenly crackled above them. "Attention all civilians," a nervous voice announced. "Docking sectors are under lockdown. Unknown hostile forces continue attacking the station. Remain where you are." Ethan laughed quietly. "Yeah, great advice," he muttered. The lift finally stopped with a loud metallic sound. The doors opened into a dark cargo hangar filled with small transport ships. Most of the hangar was empty now. Pilots had already escaped. After the emergency alarm started, Ethan quickly led Lyra between the parked ships. At the far end of the hangar stood his old cargo vessel, the Valkyrie. The ship looked terrible. Burn marks covered one side. One engine sparked constantly. Half the lights outside barely worked. Lyra stared at the ship quietly. "It looks tired," she whispered. Ethan smirked slightly. "She survives," he answered. Suddenly loud footsteps echoed behind them. "Mercenaries, they're here," Ethan said sharply. Without wasting time, he rushed toward the ship's loading ramp. The moment they entered, Ethan slammed the controls. The ramp closed immediately. Outside, plasma gunfire struck the ship's hull loudly. Warning alarms instantly filled the cockpit. Ethan jumped into the pilot's seat and powered up the engines. "Come on. Come on," he muttered nervously. The old ship shook violently. For one terrible second nothing happened. Then finally the engines roared to life. The Valkyrie blasted upward just as mercenaries stormed into the hangar, firing wildly behind them. The ship smashed through the magnetic launch barrier and escaped into open space. Outside Orion Gate, chaos had completely consumed the station. Black warships surrounded it from every side. Smaller fighter ships battled near the docking sectors. Explosions burned across the darkness like giant fires. Ethan pushed the damaged engines harder. The Valkyrie sped through the battle while enemy ships chased fleeing civilians everywhere. One black fighter suddenly locked onto them. Warning, missile detected. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Ethan growled. The missile raced toward them fast. Lyra suddenly stepped closer to the cockpit window. Her silver eyes focused on the missile silently. Then suddenly the missile exploded by itself before reaching them. Ethan froze. "What?" Lyra quickly looked away, almost ashamed. Minutes later, the Valkyrie finally escaped into hyperspace. The stars outstretched into glowing blue light. Silence returned once again. Ethan slowly leaned back into his chair, exhausted. Then he noticed Lyra staring at an old photograph hanging near the cockpit controls. The picture showed Ethan standing beside another man wearing a military uniform. "My brother," Ethan explained quietly. "He died years ago." Lyra suddenly stepped closer to the picture. Her face changed instantly. Fear, confusion, and recognition all appeared together in her eyes. "I know him," she whispered. Ethan looked at her sharply. "That's impossible," he said. But Lyra slowly touched the photograph carefully. Then she whispered something that made Ethan's stomach tighten. "He carried me before." At that exact moment, the ship computer suddenly activated by itself. An old hidden transmission appeared on the cockpit screen. Static filled the speakers for several seconds. Then a familiar human face appeared, Ethan's dead brother. The recording looked damaged and old. "If anyone finds this message," the man said seriously, "Project Starburn has failed." Ethan's heart stopped. His brother looked directly into the camera. The surviving Lyran children must be protected at all costs, especially Subject 7. Slowly, the screen displayed a small image beside the message. A young silver-eyed girl, Lyra. Then the recording ended with one final warning. If she remembers what happened to her family, entire worlds could burn. The cockpit became completely silent after the recording ended. Only the low sound of the ship engines could be heard. Ethan stared at the dark screen in front of him, unable to move. His dead brother knew Lyra, not only knew her, he had protected her. Ethan slowly looked toward the small girl standing beside the control panel. Lyra looked frightened again, like the recording had awakened painful memories inside her mind. "Subject 7, Ethan whispered quietly. "What does that mean?" Lyra shook her head slowly. "I don't remember," she answered softly. Ethan rubbed his face tiredly. Nothing about this situation made sense anymore. First, a strange alien child appeared in front of him. Then warships attacked an entire station for her. Now his dead brother was somehow connected to everything. The ship suddenly shook violently. Warning alerts flashed red across the cockpit. "Great," Ethan muttered. "What now?" The radar screen showed 3 ships exiting hyperspace behind them. Small fast attack ships, bounty hunters. "They found us already," Ethan said angrily. The enemy ships immediately opened fire. Blue plasma blasts raced past the Valkyrie. One shot struck the rear engine hard. The entire ship trembled dangerously. Lyra grabbed the nearest seat for balance while sparks exploded from the walls. Ethan pulled the controls hard to the left, barely avoiding another attack. "Hold on," he shouted. The old cargo ship sped through a nearby asteroid field. Huge rocks floated through space around them, some as large as buildings. The bounty hunters followed closely behind. "They're too fast," Ethan growled. Another plasma blast smashed into the ship. The lights inside flickered badly. "Warning, engine failure imminent," Ethan cursed quietly. Then suddenly a rough voice echoed through the communication system. "Human pilot," the voice laughed. "Hand over the girl, and maybe we let you live." Ethan ignored the message and pushed the damaged ship deeper into the asteroid field. The Valkyrie twisted dangerously between giant rocks while enemy ships chased from behind. One hunter ship crashed directly into an asteroid and exploded instantly, but the other two continued following them. "They really want you badly, Ethan," said while focusing on flying. Lyra stayed silent. Then softly she asked, "Why are you helping me?" Ethan looked at her for 1 second before returning his eyes to space. "I don't know yet," he answered honestly. "But nobody deserves to be hunted like this." For the first time since they met, Lyra smiled very slightly, but the peaceful moment ended immediately. A powerful EMP blast suddenly struck the Valkyrie. Every system inside the ship died instantly. The engines shut down. The lights disappeared. The cockpit became dark and silent. The ship drifted helplessly between the asteroids. "No, no, no," Ethan whispered while trying to restart the systems. Outside, the two bounty hunter ships slowly approached like hungry wolves. "They disabled us," Ethan said quietly. Minutes later, loud metallic sounds echoed across the ship's hull. "They're boarding." Ethan quickly grabbed an old plasma pistol hidden beneath the pilot's seat. It only had a few shots left. Lyra looked nervous again. "Hide behind me," Ethan told her. The cargo door exploded open moments later. Smoke filled the hallway. Then heavily armed bounty hunters entered the ship one by one. Their black armor was covered with battle marks and old blood stains, at least 6 of them. The leader removed his helmet slowly. He was a tall, scarred alien with mechanical eyes. His cold gaze instantly locked onto Lyra, and for the first time since entering the ship, fear appeared on his face. "It's really her," he whispered. One younger hunter looked confused. "She's just a kid," he said. The leader suddenly grabbed him aggressively. "You idiot," he hissed. "That child destroyed an entire military fleet on Kuro Station." The room became silent. Even Ethan froze after hearing those words. The younger hunter laughed nervously. "That's impossible." The leader looked directly at Lyra again. "I saw it myself," he whispered. "After soldiers killed her mother." Every ship around her exploded. Lyra lowered her head immediately. Tears slowly filled her silver eyes. "I didn't mean to," she whispered shakily. The younger hunter raised his weapon anyway. "Enough stories," he said. "We're taking her now." The moment he stepped closer, something changed inside the ship. The air suddenly became freezing cold. Ice slowly spread across the walls. The lights above began flickering violently. Lyra's breathing became faster. "Please," she whispered. "Don't hurt me." The metal floor beneath them started shaking. One hunter panicked and fired his weapon accidentally. The plasma shot struck the ceiling, causing sparks everywhere. Then suddenly an invisible force lifted the young hunter into the air violently. His body smashed against the ceiling with terrifying force. The other hunters stepped backward, immediately in horror. "No!" Lyra cried. "Please stop." The entire ship trembled harder now. Warning sirens restarted automatically. Ethan quickly moved in front of her protectively. "Everybody get back," he shouted. The hunters stared at him like he was insane. "You're protecting that thing," one whispered. Ethan looked directly at them. "She's not a thing," he answered coldly. "She's scared." Lyra looked up at him slowly, shocked by his words. Then outside the ship, something even worse appeared on the radar. A massive black warship had entered the asteroid field, and it was heading directly toward them. The giant black warship moved slowly through the asteroid field like a monster hunting wounded prey. Its massive shadow covered the drifting Valkyrie completely. Inside the cargo ship, fear spread across the faces of the bounty hunters. Even their leader looked nervous now. "We have to leave," one hunter whispered. "If that ship belongs to the Dominion, we're already dead." The scarred leader quickly backed toward the cargo door. But before leaving, he looked one final time at Lyra. "You have no idea what she really is," he warned Ethan. "If she loses control again, entire systems will burn." Then the hunters escaped back to their ships as fast as possible. Seconds later, their engines ignited and disappeared into hyperspace. They would rather flee than stay near Lyra. The silence they left behind felt heavy. Ethan slowly lowered his weapon. The frozen walls around the cargo bay began melting again as Lyra calmed down. She sat quietly on the floor, hugging her knees. Tears still rolled down her pale cheeks. "I hurt people again," she whispered weakly. Ethan walked toward her carefully. "You were afraid," he answered. "You didn't do it on purpose." Lyra looked up at him slowly. Most people across the galaxy saw her as a monster, but Ethan kept speaking to her like she was normal. That confused her more than anything. Outside, the black warship continued searching the asteroid field. Its scanners swept across nearby rocks like giant glowing eyes. Ethan quickly returned to the cockpit. "All right," he muttered. "We need to move before they find us." The MP blast had damaged most of the Valkyrie systems, but after several stressful minutes, Ethan managed to restart one engine. The old cargo ship slowly drifted deeper into the asteroid field using minimum power. Hours passed quietly. Lyra eventually fell asleep near the cockpit window, still holding the old photograph of Ethan's brother in her hands. Ethan looked at her while staring carefully through the darkness. A dangerous child, hunted across the galaxy, connected somehow to his dead brother. None of this felt real anymore. Finally, the Valkyrie reached a hidden location deep inside the outer colonies. A forgotten human settlement called Haven Ridge. The colony had been built years ago after the Galactic War. Far away from major trade routes, far away from governments, people came here to disappear as the Valkyrie landed. Old metal buildings appeared beneath heavy snow and strong winds. The colony looked poor but peaceful. Ethan sighed quietly with relief. "We made it," he said. Lyra woke slowly and stared outside the window. "Is this safe?" she asked softly. Ethan hesitated before answering. "I hope so." The moment they entered the colony streets, several armed humans immediately surrounded them. Old rifles aimed directly at Ethan and Lyra. One older woman stepped forward from the crowd slowly. Her gray hair moved with the cold wind. A long scar crossed one side of her face. Ethan recognized her instantly. "Mara," he said with surprise. The woman ignored him completely. Her eyes locked onto Lyra, and suddenly all color disappeared from her face. "No," she whispered. The armed colonists became nervous immediately. "You know her?" Ethan asked carefully. Mara slowly stepped closer toward Lyra. Her hands were shaking. Then quietly, almost emotionally, she said, "You have your mother's eyes." Lyra stared at the old woman in confusion. "You knew my mother," she whispered. Mara closed her eyes painfully for a moment. "Yes," she answered softly. "And I knew your father too." Ethan froze instantly. Lyra stepped forward quickly. "My father?" she asked. Mara nodded slowly. "He was human." The cold wind around them suddenly felt silent. Ethan looked completely shocked. "That's impossible," he said. But Mara shook her head. "During the war, many humans protected Lyran refugees," she explained. "Most soldiers feared them, but one man didn't." Lyra listened carefully, almost afraid to breathe. Mara smiled sadly. "Your father was one of the bravest men I ever knew," she said. "He fought against entire fleets just to protect innocent families." Then Mara looked directly at Ethan. "He served beside your brother." Ethan's stomach tightened instantly. "What was his name?" he asked quietly. Mara became silent for a few seconds. Then she answered, "Captain Daniel Cole." Ethan felt the ground disappear beneath him. Daniel Cole, his father, the man everyone believed died before Ethan was even born. Lyra stared at Ethan with wide silver eyes. Then suddenly she understood why his face felt familiar. "You," she whispered softly. "You look like him." Mara nodded slowly. "That's why she stopped when she saw you." Lyra's eyes filled with tears again. For years she searched every station asking strangers if they were her father, Mara explained. Quietly, she was too young to remember his face. Lyra looked down sadly. "I thought maybe one day he would answer yes." she whispered, before anyone could speak again. Loud sirens suddenly exploded across the colony. Everyone looked toward the sky, above Haven Ridge. Giant black warships appeared through the clouds, dozens of them. Then one massive ship moved forward. Slowly, far larger than the others, its weapons began charging with terrifying blue light. Mara's face turned pale. "They found us," she whispered. Then a cold voice echoed from every speaker across the colony. "Return the girl, or this world dies tonight." The sky above Haven Ridge turned dark within seconds. Dozens of black warships blocked the sunlight completely. Their engines burned like red eyes in the clouds. Heavy weapons slowly charged across their hulls. The peaceful colony that had survived. Years of silence was now trapped under a death shadow. People in the streets screamed and ran for cover. Old buildings shook as the pressure of massive ships filled the air. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, looking up at the fleet. "This is not just a rescue mission," he said quietly. "This is an invasion." Lyra stood beside him, her small hands trembling. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt." Mara stepped forward with her old rifle, shaking slightly. "Everyone inside shelters now." She shouted to the colonists, but it was too late. A loud transmission echoed across the entire colony. "Final warning," a cold voice said. "Return the Lyran subject immediately, or Haven Ridge will be erased." The sky above them suddenly lit up with charging energy cannons. Ethan looked at Lyra. "They're not here for talks," he said. "They're here to erase everything." Lyra's silver eyes filled with fear again. "I can stop them," she whispered weakly. "I can make it end." Ethan quickly grabbed her shoulders. "No," he said firmly. "You are not a weapon, for the first time." Lyra looked confused. "Everyone says I am," she replied softly. Ethan shook his head. "Then everyone is wrong." At that moment, the ground shook violently. The first orbital strike hit the edge of the colony. A massive explosion destroyed an entire ridge of buildings. Fire spread across the snow-covered ground instantly. People screamed in panic. Mara shouted again, "Defensive positions!" Old human turrets hidden across the colony, activated after years of silence. Rusty but still alive. Then something unexpected happened. Across the horizon, hundreds of small ships appeared. Not enemy ships, human ships, old battle cruisers, mining ships, even civilian transports, all jumping into orbit around Haven Ridge. Ethan stared in shock. "What is this?" he whispered. Mara smiled slightly. "You thought this colony was empty," she said. "It was never empty." A new voice came through open communication channels. "We are with you," the voice said. "Humanity does not abandon its own." The sky filled with chaotic movement. Human ships engaged the Black War Fleet instantly. Explosions lit up the clouds. Laser fire crossed the sky like burning rain. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand and moved her toward the colony shelter. But Lyra stopped suddenly. "Why are they fighting for me?" she asked softly. Ethan didn't answer immediately, because even he didn't understand. In space above them, the battle escalated quickly. Human ships were smaller, older, and weaker, but they fought without hesitation. One damaged cruiser crashed directly into an enemy warship, destroying both. Another civilian ship used itself as a shield to protect evacuation transports. The colony speakers suddenly broadcast a message from all human channels. A united voice. "If you want her," it said, "you go through us first." Lyra looked up at the sky in disbelief. "They're dying for me," she whispered. Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. "No," he said softly. "They are fighting for what you represent." But deep inside, Ethan felt something strange. He had never seen humanity like this before. Not divided, not selfish, not afraid, but united. Suddenly a massive explosion shook the entire colony again. One enemy warship broke through the defense line. It began descending toward the ground directly. "Target locked. Haven Ridge Central Zone," Mara shouted in panic. "It's going to hit the colony." Ethan looked at Lyra immediately. She was staring at the falling ship with wide eyes. Her breathing became unstable again. No, I can stop it, she whispered. Ethan grabbed her again. Don't, he said firmly. Look at me. Lyra hesitated. The falling warship grew closer every second. Buildings below began evacuating in chaos. Then suddenly Ethan spoke calmly. You are not alone anymore. Lyra looked at him. For the first time she didn't see fear in his face. Only trust. Something inside her changed. Her eyes slowly glowed brighter, but not violently. Controlled this time. The air around them became still. The falling warship suddenly stopped mid-air. Every system on it shut down instantly. It froze completely, before crashing harmlessly into an empty field outside the colony. Silence followed immediately. Even the battle above stopped for a second. Everyone saw it. Lyra lowered her head slowly, shocked by what she had done. I didn't destroy it, she whispered. I stopped it. Ethan smiled slightly. See, he said, you're learning. But in deep space, inside the command ship of the enemy fleet, one figure watched everything carefully. The warlord Kale Veron. He turned slowly toward his officers. She is stabilizing, he said coldly. That makes her more dangerous than ever. Then he gave a final order. Activate Planet Breaker Protocol. And the colony above Haven Ridge. The largest enemy ship began charging a weapon far bigger than anything seen before. And this time, it was not aimed at soldiers. It was aimed at the entire planet beneath them. The sky above Haven Ridge turned into a nightmare of light. The massive enemy warship hovered in low orbit, its super weapon core glowing brighter every second, like a second sun being born in the sky. On the ground, people stood frozen in fear. Everyone understood what was coming now. This was not a battle anymore. This was an execution of a world. Ethan stood in the open field with Lyra beside him. Wind pushed hard against them. Snow and dust mixed in the air. He looked up at the warship and then back at the child. We don't have much time, he said quietly. Lyra's hands were shaking again. I can feel it, she whispered. It's too big. I can't stop it. For the first time, Ethan saw real fear in her eyes. Not fear of soldiers, not fear of hunters, but fear of herself failing. Mara arrived behind them with a group of armed colonists. We can't fight that, she said. It will erase everything in seconds. The sky above them started glowing brighter. Energy built up inside the warship like a storm that had no end. Kale Veron's voice echoed through all channels. End of resistance, he said coldly. This world will be erased. Lyra slowly stepped forward. I should go, she whispered. If I disappear, maybe they will stop. Ethan immediately grabbed her arm. No, he said strongly. That is exactly what they want. Lyra looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Then what do I do? She asked. I am the reason they are all going to die. Ethan stayed silent for a moment. Then he placed both hands on her shoulders. You are not the reason, he said. They are the reason because they are afraid of what they don't understand. Lyra shook her head slowly. I am dangerous, she whispered. Ethan lowered himself slightly to her level. Listen to me, he said calmly. You are not a weapon. You are not a disaster. You are a child who was never allowed to be one. Lyra froze. Those words hit something deep inside her memory. Suddenly flashes appeared in her mind, a human voice singing, warm. Hands carrying her, a promise spoken in the dark. I will come back for you. Her breathing slowed. The energy around her stopped shaking wildly. Above them, the super weapon reached final charge. 5 seconds to impact, Mara shouted. There is no time. The colonists began running, but Ethan didn't move. Instead, he stepped closer to Lyra and spoke softly. You are not alone anymore. Lyra looked up at him. For the first time, she didn't see a stranger. She didn't see fear. She didn't see rejection. She saw someone staying. Something inside her broke. Not destruction, not power, but pain turning into understanding. Lyra slowly closed her eyes, and the world went silent. The sky stopped shaking. The wind stopped moving, even. The super weapon paused for a fraction of a second. Then Lyra opened her eyes again, but this time they were calm. A soft light spread across the sky. Instead of destruction, a wave of energy expanded outward. Not violent, not explosive, but disabling. The super weapon suddenly shut down mid-charge. Systems across the enemy warship failed instantly. Entire fleet engines went dark one by one. Kale Varan's voice screamed through broken channels. "What is happening?" But no one answered him. Within seconds, the entire enemy fleet became silent in orbit. Powerless, floating, alive but harmless. Ethan stared at the sky in disbelief. "You did it," he whispered. Lyra slowly opened her eyes. Confused. "I didn't destroy anything," she said softly. "I just made it stop." Then suddenly her legs weakened. Ethan caught her before she fell. Her energy faded quickly. She looked exhausted. Like something deep inside her had finally settled after years of pain. The battlefield above them turned quiet. Human ships stopped firing. Enemy ships drifted in silence. For the first time in the war, there was no sound of destruction. Only silence. Mara walked forward slowly, looking at the sky. "They surrendered without a fight," she whispered. Ethan looked down at Lyra in his arms. Her eyes were half closed now. "Why did they stop?" she asked weakly. Ethan smiled slightly. "Because you showed them something they didn't expect." Lyra looked at him softly. "What?" she whispered. Ethan answered gently. "Mercy." Tears slowly rolled down Lyra's face. But this time they were different. Not fear, not pain, relief. Above them, human ships slowly began landing across the colony. Soldiers and civilians stepped out, not as fighters, but survivors. The war was over. Later that night, under a clear sky full of broken enemy wreckage, Ethan and Lyra stood together outside the rebuilt shelter. The colony was damaged, but alive. Lyra looked at the stars quietly. "Do I still ask the question?" she whispered. Ethan looked at her. "What question?" Lyra turned slightly toward him. Her voice was soft. "Are you my father?" Ethan stayed silent for a moment. Then he gently placed a hand on her head. "I don't know about the past," he said. "But if you need someone to stay, I am already here." Lyra looked up at him slowly. For the first time she smiled without fear, and quietly she said, "Then I found him." Above them, the galaxy remained silent, but for the first time in a long time, it was not a silence of fear, it was a silence of peace.